Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Seth, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. I am super pumped to dive deep into your story and learn all about the different organizations you've started over the years.
Great to be here, David.
So it's so funny because we met or connected on LinkedIn. And when I was looking and when I originally reached out to you, I think originally it was a connection through Jonathan Pollard, who is a guru on LinkedIn. And maybe he tagged you in a post. And then I messaged you wanting to learn more. And then I saw that me and you had originally connected back in 2016 at a conference, which I have no memory of that at all. So I just think it's cool, like when you can reconnect, a decade later.
Those are two parallel stories. One, I go to a lot of legal conferences. I started out doing it because I wanted to learn and grow, and then ended up producing BluShark Digital. And part of it was I was speaking at conferences because I wanted to go and I was frugal and I could go for free if I was speaking. And then secondly, you met really good people in the green room. So I really enjoyed that. And then BluShark Digital came. So at least I had something that I would bring to the legal community. That was my share. I built a law firm through digital. But my Jonathan Pollard story, equally fascinating. I'm on an elevator visiting a friend at his big law firm in Fort Lauderdale, met a guy on the 35th floor. We traveled down to the first floor, and in that 35 floors, bonded enough that we shared socials. It was a young, hungry lawyer who had left big law himself to start his own firm. Didn't think anything of it. And like 6-7 years later, I look on LinkedIn and I'm like, who is this guy who's blowing up LinkedIn? And it's Jonathan. And we've continued the friendship. I have drinks with him when I'm down in Florida. Now he's in rural Pennsylvania somewhere, right? Actually closer to me. But you probably saw a post where it was like, you just never know who you're going to connect with. And those connections, like you and I from years ago, when you do it, it's almost, I talk about it, whether it's sales, business development, or dating. There's a rule of threes, right? The first time you meet somebody, it's nice to meet them. Second time, it's, oh, great, good to see you again. By the third time, there's more of a connection. That's why I always say on a third date, is there something more there? So for you and me, we're going from first date way, way back to second date. It may be a 7-year hiatus, but no different than any of these. And at this point, like a Jonathan Pollard's a guy that, like, if I have an issue that I'm trying to work through, I pick up the phone or text him, and it's grown to that level. So I hope to be there with you shortly.
Well, if I impress you or ask you questions at the end, I would love to have Jonathan Pollard on as a guest. So it's impossible to get in touch with him because he gets so many inbounds. So let me know if you think it's of value, because he's just fascinating. I'm going to do you a favor just to make your life easier. I'm just, based on what I've done, looked at your bio, I'm going to just read your background really quick, just as in a timeline format. And then we'll start with a question that I usually ask to see where it goes. So actually, I went to GW, you went to GW Law, you graduated, I think, was it 95?
95.
Yeah, 95. Super cool. You went straight to doing corporate law right after that. I think it was insurance litigation, but also you had started something, I think in the late 1998 or so, uslaw.com, which
So I was a founding employee of uslaw.com. It was a precursor to LegalZoom or Find Law, lawyer directory, ask a lawyer questions. You could chat with a lawyer online. There were legal forums, raised 10 million. 30 million on the table, bubble burst, April of 2000. That's when Amazon's stock tanked. And so I had to really reinvent myself. I love the entrepreneurial piece, having left the big law, having done the .com era with all these cool startups, got the bug, but it was gone at that moment. And my law partner, my buddy from college and law school, UPenn and GW for law, he says, I want to practice law. And I didn't. So we decided from day one to divide and conquer. He'd be the chief legal officer. I'd be the chief marketing and operations person. And that's how we started the firm out of his basement. And step by step, we've built the firm. The first 10 years was me building websites, optimizing them myself, eventually got some staff. And then by the time, about 10 years ago, I had a staff of 7 doing our digital. We'd grown to about a 20-lawyer law firm. That's when I spun BluShark Digital out, which is what has grown. Price Benowitz, the law firm, is now 50 lawyers, DC, Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina. And the agency now is about 300 law firms nationwide for its SEO, for building out their SEO.
So thank you. You took over and you did a better job than I could. And in 2016 is when you started BluShark Digital. Correct me if I'm wrong. Price Berkowitz LLP is a personal injury law firm mainly.
Price
Personal
Benowitz,
med-mal.
it started criminal, but we added personal injury, med-mal, we've added family and trust and estates. So we now have like a full umbrella. The plaintiff's practice is what I focus my time on and building that out. And that's grown nicely over the last few years.
And I can relate to that to some degree. My dad he's retired now, but he's a personal injury attorney for 40 years. And he built this is maybe just before pre-SEO, but he built his practice on marketing and radio ads and advertising on 1-800 lawyers or whatever it was.
What market was he in?
New York. Yeah.
And what was his firm?
Zalman and Schnurman. And he did that. He got into different areas, but he just really figured out how to market, and he did a really great job at it. And so he got out right before like SEO sort of became the big thing. You've done a lot. You go to a lot of conferences, as you said, because of now you built a business that essentially is servicing your firm. And it's what so many companies want to do, right? Oh, I built a great product for ourselves. Can we spin this out? And it's a very difficult thing to do, but we're not going to go there just yet. I want to ask you this question. You talk a lot on your own podcast and you're interviewed a lot. When it comes to learning and growth, is there something that you wish somebody asked you or talked about with you that you really never get a chance to talk to about as much when you think about your journey over the past 20 plus years?
I think that one of the things that is out there that when I reflect back and I see people that do make it or don't make it, that there's a certain amount of pushing forward and figuring things out as they come. And I'll give by analogy. There are a lot of times when you might be going to partnership. Let's say we had to do a podcast together, and we could spend the next 4 months lawyering a document to make that perfect. Or we could start with a handshake and see where it goes. And if we start to get some advertising, okay, now it's time to paper it. And I feel like when it comes to building and pushing forward with business development, there's a certain amount of, you have to have the fire in your belly. You need to figure out what verticals you want to push through. But if you think too much about what that means, because you start to develop business, now you need to service it. And now you develop more business, you need to service it more. And that comes with, oh, I can't do it myself. I need more people. Okay, great, I'll manage them. But then all of a sudden there's too many people for you to manage. So now you have mid-level managers, and that's where it becomes dicier. So I think that there are people that probably have broken that rule, that have a full business plan, get capital, and go and set out to build their business. And that's great. But in the legal space, where generally, until recently, outside capital wasn't available, your way of building is bringing in business. And I think the mantra that I've come to appreciate is, if you bring in business, you'll figure out how to staff it. And it's the business you could build the greatest mousetrap in the world, but if you don't have the business coming through, the organization is not going to get the business in. The talent will come. If you have work to do and you can afford to pay them right, you'll get the talent to do the job. And again, it's not like you can ignore it. It's hard work. Hiring and staffing is difficult. Managing is impossible. All of those things have to happen. But to me, you got to figure out where the business is coming from in order to make that machine that propels you forward.
And what I'm hearing you say is, what is it? Shoot and then aim. Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
I think shoot strategically. You want to know where you're headed. You want to be able to take your shot. But if you had to figure out all the ramifications of that work coming in, there are examples of somebody where it's an embarrassment of riches and they screw up because they can't service it. It's not that you should ignore the production. That's not it at all. I was very blessed. I knew that I had a lawyer behind me, Dave Benowitz, that no matter what I brought in, he'd figure out how to get this work done.
Did you never practice yourself?
Not since we started the firm. I did not have a caseload.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it's a divide and conquer mentality. What is practice? That's a lot of things. Somebody said, oh, you don't practice. What does that mean? If you were a sole proprietor, you would have to be the person who does the marketing, is the face of the firm, leads whatever staff you have. You have all those pieces. Practicing means many things. So if you mean has a docket of cases, no, I intentionally and purposefully did not keep a docket of cases when I started the firm, because I knew that in order to get ourselves where we wanted to go. I had to have the bandwidth to be able to, again, we started with nothing. It was two guys in a basement. I needed the autonomy. And if I was being pulled into court every day, I couldn't have done it that way.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That sounds like a very rare partnership setup where from the beginning, first of all, there's an agreement. I'm going to be doing the work and caseload. I'm going to be the work in marketing and biz dev and operations, even though I'm a lawyer and I can still do it. Take us through that growth and learning and doing that, because I don't think I've spoke to anyone who's had such a very clear delineation from the beginning. And do you think there's some magic there?
Look, it worked for us. I would say I have a business philosophy that everybody does what they want to do. Some people come to me and say, should I write a blog back in the day? And I'm like, do you like to write? And they're like, if somebody says no or pauses, the answer is not going to happen. Somebody says, should I do a podcast? Do you like talking on camera? Do you like talking to people? No, I'm really an introvert. It's not going to happen. So I didn't love the practice of law. Like I went to law school. I graduated college after the go-go 80s when sort of everything cooled off. I graduated college after the 80s. So there was a lull. Got out of law school before the dot-com bubble had started to the late 90s when everything went crazy. So I took a conservative job at a law firm to check the box, put something on the resume. But I wasn't great at it. In fact, I was pretty bad. Like my attention to detail isn't great. I'm dyslexic, so I'm always misspelling things. I was not a lockstep lawyer that was going to make partner on the substance. I was going to have to make my money driving business, forming relationships, solving people's problems. That's to me in business and in life, whether it's my 18-year-old coming to me or anything else. If you solve somebody's problems, you'll always have a job, you'll always make money. And so to me, what I want to do is make sure that whatever it is that, and as the not practice, whatever you want to call it, my job is to make sure that we have revenue in order to pay the staff and produce the product that the clients want. If we do all of that in concert, we have a business.
I can imagine many attorneys can relate to practicing and realizing that doesn't give, like the way I look at it, you're good at something if it gives you energy. I don't decide. You can be good at something and not give you energy, then you're not good at it because you don't get energy from it.
Well, right. If you don't like it, you're not going to.
You're not going to continue.
I've never heard somebody put it that way, but I think if you are driven, you could do it to check the box and you could do it to get a paycheck, maybe. But if you're given a bunch of things, and you see this look, I got between two companies, over 300 people wake up every day working for us. What I know is if somebody has a bunch of things on their plate, the thing that gives them energy is going to get that time and attention, and the stuff that doesn't gets forgotten. So the sooner that I can get people away from a multitude, focusing on what they love to do, the more likely we are. And so at BluShark, for example, we have people that build links. They love reaching out and figuring out how to connect with people and interconnect websites. There are people that love content and editing. If I tried to get the person from links to edit, it wouldn't go anywhere.
Can you take us through, so you're 2006, you're building up this firm, you're doing operations, you're doing marketing, you're essentially the operations person. Because I've heard you mention EOS, so I wasn't sure that we do scaling up. I very much follow the visionary integrator model in Lawline. I'm the visionary. I don't get into the operations as much as I can. So just so I can get a sense from you, you're the operations person, but it sounds like you're also a visionary.
No, I sit in the visionary spot. So at this point, I have two organizations. At both places, there's a head of operations.
But originally, you were operations when you first started.
Look, things I wish I had figured out. We came to EOS very late in the last few years. Probably would have been able to drive growth. I think that COVID threw us off in a lot of ways. But to me, whatever it is, Vern Harnish, during COVID, I got Vern Harnish on my podcast. I think he charged like $100,000 to speak, came on my dinky podcast because we asked him and he had nothing better to do during COVID. And objectively, he's the smartest guy in the room, right? This guy is beyond smart, what he's figured out. We actually got to ask him, my partner, Jay Ruane on the podcast, got to ask Vern any resentment given that EOS and the book Traction by Gino Wickman, as well as Strategic Coach, these are all disciples of Vern. and got to ask him, and he was very benevolent and said, no, there's plenty for everybody. I'm so happy for their success. But to me, I'm not smart enough to use scaling up. Scaling up is a complicated program. It's better. It is objectively a more in-depth, better way to do things. I found that I was lucky to get EOS implemented. Yeah. And so to me, that was I did not have the gumption to think that I could pull off scaling up, whereas EOS was a much simpler product, much less robust, but got done what I needed, which was getting people aligned.
Two things about that. One, you're absolutely right. I read the book Scaling Up. I read the book before that, which I forget what it was called, Rockefeller Habits. Yeah. And then I tried to implement it myself. Didn't work. I read Scaling Up. I ended up hiring a coach through that process, and that worked through that. My claim to fame, which I'm very proud of, is I wrote a book in 2019 called The Fast Forward Mindset. I got both Vern and Gino to both write me recommendations for the book.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
So is because I connected with both of them over the years, and it's been really valuable for us. And so let's go to the moment where you built this internal process, and it's 2016 or 2015. What is the origin story, or how do you build this company, BluShark, out of a law firm? What kind of risks were involved? What kind of concerns? Take us through the story as if watching it.
It's a lot simpler than they make it sound. It was a lot less risk in the sense that I had my internal team. And I basically, for the first 10 years of my law firm, was building digital. I started with digital, first day, built a website. It grew so much in the early weeks of SEO 20 years ago that we hired our law clerk to be a lawyer, and the second law clerk to a lawyer within like 2 weeks. It was crazy. And so what I had was every 2 years, I'd lose my person, my guy or one woman, chance, a woman. They would leave every 2 years. One person became a sports agent. One person went to solve AIDS in Europe, but they left me. And it was a risk factor. And about 10 years ago, I had an intern he'd started at the law firm as an intern, worked through admin, worked through intake. And I said, this is not for you. You're going to get burnt out, bored. I need to find you your place. We put him in marketing. And not only did he excel in marketing, but he ended up running it. And so I had this young rock star, David Breton. We call him Breton because David Benowitz was too confusing in a small firm. He became Breton. To this day, guy runs 100-person operation, 300 law firms at BluShark. People don't even know he has a first name. He's just Breton. And he needed opportunity, as did my team. If I wanted to keep excellence, I wanted to remove the cost center and turn it into a profit center. So I spun BluShark out of the law firm and turned it into its own entity. For the first few months, we were in the basement of the law firm. We then got like a sublet in an office condo.
How many people?
Seven.
Seven. And did you take all 7 of those from the law firm?
Yeah, they were because they were still doing the digital for the law firm. They were digital marketers.
Certainly. But did you literally like change payroll and they became on BluShark?
The first 4 or 5 months, they were under the law firm's payroll.
But
the next 4 or 5 months, they were attached because the law firm was the biggest client. We had one dinky client. So 90% of the expense was going to the law firm. Over time, it's still a substantial client of the agency, but it's not the same.
Can you tell me the story, if you remember, when you actually became a business, when you actually got your first client besides?
Sure. The very first client was, I think, some guy. I actually got to bump into him recently at a conference. Some guy from the South, and David Breton saw him and said, I really think we should do this. He was pushing me to take a shot. And I was like, I don't know. The thing about digital marketing is there's always more you can do. There's always more. And I'm like, I was afraid, one of my fears was, would I be taking time and attention away from the mothership, from Price Benowitz, if I did that, right? And what I realized, and the reason there was the method to the madness, was that I wouldn't have held on to David Breton. I wouldn't be able to afford great link builders, great content writers, and the people doing each element of it don't have to be the best and brightest. Somebody has to know what to do and teach them. And we've seen that play out in that if I want to hire somebody in DC, I remember this from 10 years ago. I wonder what it is today. If I hire somebody with SEO experience who lives in DC and pre-COVID had to come to the office, just putting SEO on your resume put you at $115,000 a year, and you knew nothing. That got you a job at ARP. It's a neighborhood big national association in DC. And just saying, for us, we play at such an elite level that the only way, just like a law firm that has summer associates and they become associates, and then that there are places that train everybody from within. Cravath wants it done the Cravath way. That was a place I went after college, before law school. What we found is having a fellowship program where we bring people in for the summer, sometimes during the year. There are 3: summer, spring, fall. Train people. We get about half our employees from that program, because we're able to get the methodology, we get culture, we get the culture buy-in, we get all of that in a way. And it's, instead of having 3 30-minute interviews and maybe a personality test, we have 6 months of working with somebody to know whether or not this is somebody who fits our company culture and can accomplish what we need.
That early period, because I'm just fascinated, because this is not a normal. You realize this is not normal, correct?
That's my normal.
No, it's your normal, but I don't know if you might think everybody does this, because I know you know better than that, obviously, but it is not normal to have a law firm and then build a digital marketing agency out of it.
It's not normal, but you've seen people's case management systems come out of law firms.
Totally.
It's tough. And look, at different levels of it. I think the ones that have gone out and raised equity, have done that have had one trajectory growth. I've really admired, for instance, like a Smart Advocate that came out of Jerry Parker's shop, very successful New York law firm, big PI piece of software. Their growth has been consistent, but not the same meteoric rise that some of the other guys that raised real outside equity have had.
So take us through just to get a sense, that early year or two, did you make a decision? Okay, we're going to go to every trade show that we can that does this. How did you get business that early period? Is cold calling?
No cold calling. It was, look, we were on the map. People saw what we were doing. I started speaking at conferences here and there, and realized that was when you connect with people. There are people that make their money with cold calling. I've never cracked that code particularly. For me, it's teaching. I have never been a sales first person for the last 12, 15 years. It started with just a way to get to the conferences, and then it became a vehicle for BluShark. To me, when I go to a conference, it's a multi-touch. I might find a client for BluShark. I might find a potential referral partner for Price Benowitz, and they might end up on a podcast 7 or 8 years later. You just never know where. And we have clients that heard me speak 8 years ago, and then listened to a podcast 3 years ago, and then finally got an email newsletter from us and said, you know what, I actually need some help. And so to me, we have now built out a team so that I'm known for going to conferences, but we now built out a team that supports that. So I can split my time and make sure that I'm not overcommitted, but I love it. I love going and meeting new people. I love the serendipity and those connections that you make. And so to me, I go to 3 conferences a month for the fall and the spring. And to me, I probably go to 12 different events a year, maybe a few masterminds on top of that. For me, that energizes me. Like you were talking about before, what you love. Yeah. I think that's it. When I go there and I'm meeting really cool, smart people and exchanging ideas, to me, that's not a bad thing. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's funny, my wife and I, she would be happy if we sat at home and didn't go out of the way. I'm like, let's do something social. Like I get energy out of those social interactions. And so to me, the fact that I'm able to make a buck by going to really cool, interesting places, meeting cool people, to me, it's not really work. It's just, I'm in Miami at the Lowe's Hotel, one of the best places in Miami for me, and in Vegas with great food and great people. And there are times when it gets old, like anything else, where you're like, hey, I don't really want to do that this day. But for the most part, even if I get on the plane, I'm not sure why I'm going there. By the time I'm off, there's something about that dynamic that I love.
100%. And I saw you just interviewed somebody who has a conference coming next week. Something in
Pilma.
What is it called?
The Pilma.
So Pilma, you're a sponsor. No, you're a sponsor there. Is about on May 5th or something, or May 7th.
There's a Disrupt conference coming up.
Yeah,
the Disrupt coming up. The one that was on the podcast before that was Pilma, Ken Hardison. He started this thing like 13 years ago. I stumbled into it about 11 or 12 years ago. It was a group of people that it was personal injury, marketing, and management. And to me, that was what wasn't out there. You go to Jay, and I'm like, there are all these internal meetings, but they weren't my peeps. They were amazing trial lawyers and are very successful, make a lot of money doing great work. But the geeks like me that love the intersection of law, marketing, and business didn't have a home. And that's one of the reasons I've returned to Pilma year after year, and Ken has me speak, because like, to me, those are the intersections that, to me, gets rid of, you said, hey, are you practicing? It's other people like me that have that role, rather than going to a place. And as I've evolved, just looking at BluShark and SEO and local search, like, we've become the thought leaders of local search and how you can use the Google Maps in order to bring in business. And to me, as that has evolved, I've gotten to the point, evolution-wise, business-wise, where I never want to sell something. I don't want anybody in your audience to say, I should do SEO because I heard Seth on the radio. If you want to do search engine optimization, if you want to be doing local search, I can tell you why we're great at, why we're passionate about it, why we case studies of where we've shown ROI, but I don't want to be there telling you that this is better than networking or billboards or TV. It's what I've found to be useful. And I think that when people are in the market for it, I'd rather be in a position to say, this is how we do it. These are the things we do. And I know that a certain number of people that hear me speak will try to do it themselves. God bless them. But if I become that resource as a person that, when you throw your hands up, that you say, hey, they're on my short list, that's all I can ask for.
I appreciate that. In the last few minutes, I wanted to share an interesting story because we talked about originally, like, we both have 500 connections in common on LinkedIn. In 2006, when I was in law school, 2005 or so, I was my second year of law school. I started an online TV show. I started a TV show on public access, and I put it online really before podcasts were a thing. Right. It was called True NYC. And my goal was to interview as many entrepreneurs as I could to figure out the magic answer, how to start a business. One of the people who I was able to interview at that time was Peter Shankman, right after he sold Harrow. And then Simon Sinek was another one. And so I interviewed him, and because I was following him, I was a subscriber of Harrow. And of course, when I'm searching you up, I see Peter Shankman is a futurist in residence, which I'd never seen before or heard before, and just seemed like a weird connection there. So I wanted to learn more about how you're working with great
Peter. I met during the .com bubble. We had a circuit, we meaning the whole greater community, this is like 98 to 2000 through 2000. Those were the golden years. And every night, Monday through Thursday, there were parties in New York City. There was one at 6, 7, and 8. By 9 o'clock, they were all done. And we would bounce from place to place. A guy named Bernardo made a list of where we needed to go, and we followed Bernardo's list. And Peter was part of that community. It was a bunch of really innovative people, similar to what we're seeing now with AI, where people are like, the old school is scared of it and the new school is embracing it. And got to know him and befriend him. And we had a great time. I remember he had a birthday party sponsored where, like, all sorts of now celebrities were running around. And he literally had people pay for his birthday party at this crazy event space. And it was just a magical time. So when I took a deep breath and saw Peter, who had sold Harrow and was doing a bunch of really interesting keynotes, said, hey, it wouldn't be cool if we had somebody who was always thinking about what comes next. And whether it was crypto, whether it was AI, whatever those things were, Peter is one of those special guys who's always A, asking questions, B, literally has the time. He doesn't have 300 people on his staff. He has one really cool assistant. And so he plays with this stuff, and he takes dinners with people that are playing with this stuff. And so the idea that we could have somebody on our team that's constantly thinking about what comes next seemed like, why not?
Why would he want, like, what? It seems like he's been like, was there an interesting conversation? I know we're running out of time, but was there one thing?
It was basically, how you need a reason to connect. This podcast, if you'd called me up and said, Seth, I just want to talk about business development, how you got where you were, I'd be like, yeah, maybe. It'd probably get kicked for 9 months and never happen. You called and said, I want to be on your podcast. I'm sure. Where's the link? I sign up. I'm there. And to me, working with him, the title, it's a fun title that gets attention, but it was really a way to, short of having Peter on a podcast monthly, it was a way to have a more meaningful connection where my team, which is constantly in production mode, would have a thought leader on the outside affiliated with them, whose job it was to be able to spend some time and push and prod to make sure that we don't get behind.
I love that. Last final questions. What books have had the most impact on you as an entrepreneur? Is there any that classic books that have changed your trajectory in your career?
The classics, from Good to Great to E-Myth to Traction, Fireproof, with Fireproof being the law firm version of Traction that Mike Morrison and John Knockhazel wrote. But I think what I'm most currently excited about may be Unreasonable Hospitality. Got to meet the author of it, who
What is it called?
Unreasonable Hospitality.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought it was on your radar. It was written by a guy who took 11 Madison from a good restaurant to the #1 restaurant in the world. He has since spun out of it and now runs a coaching and speaking outfit on it. But it really just makes you think about how to give better service. There's many caveats to it, and it's easier to do that with a $1,000 a check per person restaurant than it is with a $6. But the concepts are there, and how are we providing memorable service, which is one of those things that's obviously really important.
And is there any podcasts you listen to regularly?
I bounce around a lot, so I can't tell you that there is one. Maybe the ADHD gets me there. So I host 3, which is the Law Firm Blueprint with Jay Ruane. We talk about law firm growth. I have the SEO Insider, where I meet and that's really the only reason I started it, is because I wanted to get really smart people that if I called and said, hey, you want to talk to me? They'd be like, no. Neil Patel was introduced through a friend. I wanted 30 minutes with Neil. We have 30 minutes with Neil, going to drop in a couple of days. And the final one is the Conference Connection, which is just for funsies. A buddy of mine, Paul Faust, and I go to too many conferences, and we decided that we were going to put one out there just to educate people about what's coming up and help them figure out where they should be going.
You ever going to throw your conference yourself?
Good question. It is actually a topic of conversation in the legal space. There are so many right now that it's actually slipping in attendance a little bit. I have a dear friend, John Fisher, who does a mastermind, can be called a mastermind experience, which goes on three times a year for lawyers. And I help him put that on. But I enjoy the fact that I can show up, whether it's to a PILMA, National Trial Lawyers, Mass Torts, where I speak or present at each. And the fact that I'm able to not have to deal with the nonsense of putting on the conference, but actually get to enjoy the stuff like meeting cool people that I connect with 8 years later.
Well, Seth, thank you for sharing these insights and your time. I'm looking forward to seeing what is the company that spins out of BluShark as you're learning. Maybe it'll be a coaching and training company. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? There have been a few people that have done rather well with it, but I appreciate your time, David. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Seth.
Bye-bye.